Okay, so hello and welcome everyone. We are midway in our Labs for Liberation Summer Institute lecture series. And so this is our fourth lecture. My name is Angela Stanley, and I am the accessibility coordinator for the Summer Institute. I am a brown-skinned Black woman with black hair. It's slicked back. I'm wearing a rust brown shirt and black and brown framed glasses with over the ear headphones. We're happy to have you today, but before we get started, I just wanted to go over some housekeeping details. So we have captioning as well as ASL interpretation. For those who prefer to engage with the captions in a separate window, I will add the stream text link to the chat. This takes you to a separate window where you can view the captions. You can change the color, size, and font that they're presented to you. Our ASL interpreter is currently pinned to the right of me. However, they will move about as our speakers share their slides to ensure that you are able to view the speakers and the ASL interpreter. Ensure that your view is side-by-side gallery. The options will change as speakers share their screen or stop sharing their screen, so just keep an eye out for that. As mentioned in our communications, we've enabled the Q&A function for this webinar, so you can ask any questions that you might have. We'll also be having a dedicated question and answer period following the presentation, as well following the presentation and the brief 5-minute break. This meeting will be 2 hours long, so please stretch, move, or otherwise listen to your body's needs in order to engage fully. The other way that we ask that you engage with this lecture and each other is by using our Discord channel. For those who have not signed up yet, we'll provide you with a link at the end of the session, and you can use this to join. If you've recently sent your request to join, acceptance to Discord will be granted following this meeting. We will have folks monitoring those channels to ensure that everyone is able to comfortably engage in the space. So for today's event, myself and Walker Brewer will be your access doulas. Please reach out to us if there are any access issues that come up. As a reminder, this and all of the future lectures are recorded, and for accessibility and privacy reasons, we ask that any screenshots, notes, or other recorded materials be used for your personal learning and educational purposes only. In seeking to build a consent-based community, we ask that you seek and gain consent from our speakers, lecturers, etc., before sharing their work. To model this, we have permission from our speakers to share recordings of these lectures with our Summer Institute participants, including our study buddies. If these lectures do become available to the wider community, we will be sure to post about this on social media and send out an email. So with all of this in mind, and without further ado, I will pass it over to our Institute co-directors and our moderators for today, Amy Hamrai and Moya Bailey.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Hamrai. I'm an olive-skinned, transmasculine Iranian person with short, dark curly hair and glasses. I'm wearing a black t-shirt. On behalf of our whole Labs for Liberation team, I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you to our speaker series. As Angela said, we're about halfway through, and it's been very exciting so far, and we're really just so thrilled for today's talk from Leah Lakshmi, Piepzna-Samarasinha, who I'll introduce later. Please note that this is a webinar, so you can submit questions through the Q&A function. The chat will not take place here for accessibility reasons, but if you registered for the talk, you should have a link to Discord, and we will share that link again in the chat as well. And when you get to Discord, you can click on lecture chat. And I'll pass it over to Moya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Moya Bailey. I am a dark-skinned Black person with a short afro and glasses. Today, I'm wearing a shirt that says, everyone loves someone who's had an abortion. I want to begin with an acknowledgement of both the land, the labor, and love that went into creating this gathering today. I am joining you all, and we are recording this webinar via digital devices that are linked all over Turtle Island. I live in the traditional unceded homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, though many other tribes have also called this area home. We are in a global community with many of you in spaces where the traditional stewards of the land have been displaced. We recognize that land acknowledgements are not enough. In a conversation with Indigenous elders, it's made clear that land acknowledgements can be used to help white supremacy relax. And we're not interested in doing that. But with our turn to the digital, it can be easy to forget that the hardware that connects us is made from minerals extracted from stolen land and mined by people exploited around the world. So when discussing our work and its social justice implications, we cannot forget the too often invisibilized logics of settler colonialism and the land, labor, and love that makes this lecture series possible. So in addition to acknowledging the land that supports this Global Labs for Liberation project, we work to make sure our work supports the descendants of those whose enslaved labor made this space possible. We acknowledge the labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants who've enriched this region of the world with cultural and economic contributions that can never truly be quantified. May we add to this remembrance and acknowledgement of the Congolese miners who mine the minerals that power our digital devices and the Zhangzhou Foxconn factory workers that make many of these devices. The exploited labor of people around the planet is supplemented by the love that went into making this event possible. Many thanks to Amy and Angela, Walker, and other members of the Labs for Liberation team. Thank you to the Mellon Foundation and our respective institutions for helping to make this possible. But thank you mostly to the ancestors and also scholars and activists, contemporary organizers that love each other and made this possible. I'm going to share a brief image of some of those people who have made our work possible here. These are contemporary organizers as well as people who have gone on but have been an inspiration for the work that we're doing today. We'll have a link to this also so that you can see these folks in greater detail. In an ongoing pandemic, amidst genocides, wars, earthquakes, what's happening in Sudan, Iran, and ecological devastation around the world, it can be overwhelming to think about doing business as usual. So, as always, let's think of our time together as a little pocket of possibility, a buoyant bubble in a world on fire. We'll have a break after Leah speaks. And before I pass it back to Amy to do an introduction and bring on Leah, I want to just do a little summary of our code of conduct to make sure that we're all on the same page. Labs for Liberation is committed to promoting a considerate and respectful environment focused on collaboration, accessibility, communication, curiosity, and generosity. We are dedicated to creating a consent-based anti-harassment culture rooted in principles of disability justice. And with that, I will turn it over to Amy.
Thank you, Moya. So we're so thrilled to have Leah Lakshmi Piepzna-Samarasinha with us today. They are a Burgher, Tamil, Sri Lankan, Irish, and Galician writer, disability and transformative justice movement worker slash structural engineer. I love that. And older cousin slash auntie. They're also the author or co-editor of 10 books, including Care Work, The Future is Disabled, Tongue Breaker, and Dirty River. And today we will be talking about the power of the wild disabled idea, disabled creativity, chaos factor in building disabled collectively accessible performance spaces. And I'll turn it over to Leah. Welcome.
Oh my God. Hi, everybody. That got me really emotional. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Moya. Thank you, Angela, and all the language justice workers for being here. Thank you, all of y'all who are joining from all over this planet. Um, my name's Leah. I use they, and them pronouns. Oh, all the hearts are so cool. Thank you. Back at you. Um, so I'm a sand-skinned, silver, brown, and green curly-haired non-binary femme. And today I'm wearing a shirt that says, hold on, I'll just flash you. It says, "Thank God for femme tops." And I'm joining you from Southwest Philadelphia in Lenape territory, Lenape. And I really am thankful for that invocation of the ancestors. I actually just wanted to, I'm going to go off script, so I'll go slow for access, but I wanted to share an image that is on my desk every day of my grandmother in the middle, Jackie Alvis, in Singapore in around 1948 with my dad. And that's her husband, who is not my dad's father. And she was a mixed race Sri Lankan, very non-binary, that's short hair for the 40s, teacher and socialist feminist, and I carry her with me every day. Um, and I also have a picture of me and Stacy Milburn Park when we were babies in 2010, which I'm just gonna flash y'all. We were little. We were we were dorks. So I'm standing wearing an Insight t-shirt and she's sitting in her chair with her trach. And that was 15 years ago. And it's also present. So this talk is, as Amy just said, about the wild disabled idea, um, specifically in disability justice performance spaces in times of grief and mass genocide. Casual. Um, and I'm going to talk, and I'm also going to have some journal exercises towards the end of my talk, and then we're going to have a break and Q&A. But some of my opening arguments and stories I want to share is so I usually get my best ideas when I'm sick, crazy, or something has not gone according to the plan, or I'm on the toilet, whether it's in a good or a bad way. And I really mean that. And I worry a lot that as disability justice gets more here, longer term, that that's going to go away. And that it's going to go away from what it was when I found disability justice, where the way I experienced it was a bunch of crips and crazies that were doing really raw, wild shit, and nobody cared about us but us, so we could do whatever the fuck we wanted. And no one was giving us money, so we also could do it our way because we didn't have to hit their benchmarks or be legible. And we weren't in institutions except for, that kind, haha, by which I mean university, etc. So there were really no rules except for the rules that we made up. And it meant that we were doing so much wild, disabled, crip innovating from a place of being rejected and excluded, because if all that you have is your soul, you have nothing to lose. And of course, as you do that, and both the powers that be and well-meaning people who have fought their way to get into institutions, right, take notice and we're asked to be into those spaces. And that's not wrong because we deserve resources, we deserve to be everywhere. I think there's a risk that little by little, that wildness can go away and there can start to be a sense of orthodoxy, that there's this method, that there's this one way that you do it. And also that if you just do it and you tick all the check boxes, it'll just work out, right? I weirdly work in some like disabled grant making spaces now, and there's always this question of how do you measure the outcomes? And I was like, the outcomes sometimes are that everyone's not dead, but you can't guarantee that, right? Like our outcomes do not go according to plan, right? And often, and I'll say that going back to the idea of design, and I have a funny thing to screen share in a second. I think there's an idea in there when I hear the word design that's like, oh yeah, if you design it right, then everything's gonna work out. It's gonna work out. You can control that. But part of disability is failure, not because we're bad, but because we're always navigating body minds that don't fit into systems. And we live the Crip X factor of, my dad had those Murphy's Law posters in the basement growing up where it's like, whatever will go wrong, can go wrong, will go wrong. And Crip Murphy's Law is real, right? And, I think that that's both can be complicated and it's also part of what makes us special and important and holy. Um, and so, yeah, and okay, I'm just going to do the quick screen share because it's cute. One sec. And everyone pray if you do that because everyone who's seen me do something. Okay, wait, can people see it? Can I get a verbal from somebody or an audio from somebody?
Yes, we can see
Okay.
it.
Okay, so this is just a quick aside, which was when Amy and Moya approached me and were like, we want you to be in Labs for Liberation. It's about design. I was like, I'm not a designer. What are you talking about? And then Amy and me were texting, and Amy was like, no, 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 this is what it means. And I was like, oh, I guess I design like performance spaces and communities and tours and stuff, then lols. And Amy was like, yeah, that's what we're talking about. And I guess I wanted to share that both because like, haha, funny, and also because there's a tension in like the professionalization and the codification of disability um, that I'm talking about where like even somebody like me, where I wrote or co-edited 10 books, can be like, I don't know, I'm just a doofus. I don't do anything, and but I digress. So yeah, so some things I want to say about the wild disabled idea are that thing I said before about like I get the best ideas when I'm sick. Um, It's also like, to me, I'll just throw out a few examples and I'll tell more stories. It's that thing that I witness in so much disability justice performance art, where it's a bunch of Crips being like, fuck, okay, let's go big. Like, Sins Invalid, 2005, 2007, right? Oh, let's just make a black and brown queer-centered performance art thing about disability, sexuality, colonization, the body, ugliness, and power, and use stories to change the world. Wild. It wasn't like, let's do a little policy idea. It's like, let's do some really perverted, disabled, cutie BIPOC art, right? Um, Sick and Disabled Queers, which is a now mostly defunct, but was really close to my heart for a long time Facebook group. That was started by, one Arab Jewish disabled queer that was like, I just want to make a group that's mostly not white disabled where we can talk about, being sick and disabled queers that exploded and was such a place for disabled people, mostly in North America, but somewhat all over the world, to be from our beds and be like, whoa, let's create grassroots working class disabled theory that's not white, right? That's not, yeah. And also like raise money for the accessible toilet. Um, Crips for eSIMs, which is the project that Alice Wong, Jane Shi, and me created a year and a half ago, where we were just like, we can't march for Palestine, but what can we do? Well, disabled people really know how to make a crowd fund, and we just hit $2 million US dollars. That was literally three of us in bed on a heating pad with a Google Doc being, what can we do? It's just the wild idea. It's the wild idea, and it can't be controlled, and it can't really be like created in an institutional setting, right? And I'm here to argue that like that weirdness and failure and shit not working are some important parts of this disabled design process that I want to tease out. And it goes against these ideas of do it right, do it correctly, and it'll work, right? And then you get into like, so in the United States, there's this idea of ADA compliance or the Americans with Disabilities Act, which many of us have run into, which is when, like, it's like, oh, there's this idea of the list. Like you'll go to a hotel and be like, do you have a room that's accessible? And they're like, it's ADA compliant. And we know that means nothing. Like it means slightly better than nothing. But, it doesn't mean like, oh yeah, totally, it's accessible. But the people who are saying, oh yeah, it's ADA compliant, we checked everything on the list. We as disabled folks know that we actually have to go there and be like, all right, what does that actually mean? And, it's the bare minimum. Often it's bullshit. Sometimes it often leaves out so much of our access needs. But we also do the list in our own way because we want to make sure that things don't fuck up and are accessible. And I want to be clear, I'm not just saying, hey, just freebird the width of a door. It could be 2 inches. That's fine. Because we know that there are specific things that have to be there to make access work, right? And then, but then the both and is, I have been blessed to be a part of so many disabled, Black and brown, queer art spaces where we go way beyond ADA access. Like we do deep, rich access. We plan everything out. We have all of our own lists. And you know what? Something always still goes wrong. Like there's always the thing that you didn't anticipate. And that's both because we are usually in spaces 99% of the time that were not created by disabled people. So we are in built environments that we have to use that we didn't make, right? So there's going to be some shit. It's got two elevators. Oh, they both broke. Oh, here's the ramp. It broke. Whatever, right? Um, and and yet the stories that come out of there are not just about us going home and failing. They're about the disabled performance spaces I've witnessed us make in spaces of institutional failure that are actually some of our greatest strengths. And I'm going to pause because that's a lot of words. So, um, yeah. And I will say that chaos is obviously frightening, like always, and especially right now in an increasingly hot and dangerous world. And also, the chaos that comes into our spaces are also portals where we make something new. And I really mean that. So, I'm going to give you some examples and tell some stories. And this is the bit in the description where I was like, I'm going to tell the story of the three ramps, and which is like the story of the three bears, but different. And they're three, maybe I made it into four stories of like different times where institutional spaces promised access and then failed. Okay, so the first one is Toronto, maybe 2006, 2010. And I just want to say, as I was writing this talk, I was like, I'm so lucky to have been a part of making disabled art with a bunch of fucking freaks and weirdos for my adult life. And I just want to say, I hope these stories help you know that you don't have to wait for the money or the permission to do it. You can just do it. You can just do it. You can do it with what you have, because that's what we did. Okay, so maybe 2006, maybe 2010. It's in Toronto, and we were doing some kind of performance thing. And at the time, I want to shout out Sarah Pinder, Pinder, made out of disabled activism in Toronto, was like, I'm going to make a Google Doc of all the accessible spaces for performances and events in Toronto. And it still exists. And we were just using this Google Doc, and we went to a venue that, wheelchair accessible bathrooms, wheelchair accessible doors, and they were like, oh yeah, we got a ramp to the stage, totally. And we were like, great, great, we're going to use the Gladstone because it's one of the spots that's bigger, that's accessible. And it's a bunch of people performing, and one of us is a power chair user, right? So we get there and wait for it. Of course, it's, oh, a ramp to the stage? And the stage manager, who's this white cis-abled guy, keeps being like, well, the bathrooms are accessible. And we're like, no, we want to be on the stage. We're the performers. And he's not quite getting it, which is classic. And it's that model of like, no, the access is there to serve you as a client. You're not the performer. You're not the organizer. And of course, it's like, oh, the ramp's in the basement. It's locked up. Oh, the key? I don't know. And then he's like, well, I guess you'll just have to perform on the floor, right? Like not on the stage. And he just assumed that those of us who were not power chair users who could navigate steps would just be on the stage and she'd be on the floor. And it's an hour before the doors are opening, right? And so that's a real classic moment. And what we did was like, no, we're all going to perform on the floor and fuck you. And we're going to talk about it on the mic, and we're going to let the audience know what happened, and we're going to call you out. And as many of you may know, the thing about, so it's like, it's not a theater with like seats that go up. It's like flat seating and then the stage. So when you don't perform on the stage in that kind of environment, for people who can see, it's very hard to see what's happening on the floor if you're more than 3 seats like back in the audience, right? So we're like, okay, this is gonna affect, the performance, attributes of this performance. But we named that where we were like, right, so this is where we get crypt creative. I don't think that we knew back then to audio describe. Like maybe we did. I might not remember. I would do that now. But it was an intervention and interruption where we're like, we're in this space. It promised us access. It failed. We're not abandoning each other. We're going to perform together in solidarity. We invite you as audience members who make the space to be in solidarity with us. And to me, that's turning an access failure from an institution into a success for us as a multi-abled, disabled performance group, right? Who is working class? We didn't have money. We're like, we barely have the $200 for the space, right? We don't have the ability to just find another one last minute. Let's do what we can. So that's one story. And then a couple more are it's 2011 and really different. I'm performing with Sins Invalid in the Bay Area of California. And I'm already blown away because actually, I'm sorry, it was 2009. Um, but Patty Byrne, the founder and co-director of Sins, had said, okay, so we do a tech week at Sins. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, you got to take off work. And I was like, a whole week to do tech? Because I was used to like, you roll up to the gay bar and you have an hour to tech 12 queers. And she was like, yeah, because things will go wrong. And because we deserve to have this abundance of time to get it right, to get it really right for us as multi-disabled people. And that blew my mind. And she's like, yeah, I'll give you money and we'll feed you. And I was like, I don't understand what's happening. And I want you to take that home as an example because the creation of spaciousness for things to go wrong and anticipating that things will go wrong and that we're not the wrong, but we need to make space for things to go on crypt time, right? So, Patty's driving over at least one, maybe two other power chair users in her accessible van from the East Bay, because at the time there were two wheelchair accessible cabs in all of Oakland. And she had her own van, right? So, she's driving, and I think the performers are probably staying at her house. And, I've taken Bart over and I'm in the green room. And then the van gets there and we get news. Oh, yeah, the ramp's broken on the van. It's not unfolding. So everybody's trapped inside. And even as an ambulatory cane user who's sick, there had been so many times where I'd had my variation of a built access fail and I'd been in an able performance environment. And it was just like, well, the show has to go on. So just, suck it up. And what happened next blew my mind, which was that everyone was like, no, we don't start until we figure this out. We're not going to start without the power chair users. We're going to wait. And there was just hours of like, well, do we get welding equipment? There's a bike store nearby. Maybe they have equipment. Should we get some plywood and make a ramp? And I don't remember how we fixed it. But it was my first moment of like disabled interruption of like, no, we stop and we bend the performance to us. And if people need to stay late, like people who are working at the theater, they'll do that. We'll work it out. Um, and then two last ones were Mangoes with Chili, which was a queer and trans people of color performance group that I co-ran for around a decade. Um, so in 2014, we were doing our big annual show at the National Queer Arts Festival. And one of our performers was a manual wheelchair user. And I was calling the theater and I was like, do you have a ramp from the green room to the stage? And they were like, oh, yeah. We get to the theater, there's this beautiful ramp. And I was like, this is awesome. We do the show, it's great. And then the next year, we are using the same venue and I don't call to ask because I'm like, well, they have this beautiful ramp. And then we get there and it's our final performance ever because we were ending the whole thing and the ramp is gone. And I was like, and it's 2 hours to showtime. And I was like, I talked to one of the people there and I'm like, what happened to the ramp? And she's like, oh, well, we built it for you guys last year. And then after we built it, we destroyed it. And I was like, I was like, wow. And, I had to tell one of the performers who needed it, I was like, "Hi, so I did not anticipate they would destroy the ramp after it was built." And they just looked at me and they said, like, "Leah, we have to just anticipate that the abled will destroy access at all costs." And I was like, "Yeah, and this sucks now." And it was a terrible lesson, but it was a real lesson, right? And then finally, the last story I'll tell was with a performance called Crypt Magic and Revolutionary Love that is came out of a group called Performance Disability Art that Cyrus, Marcus Ware, and myself started in Toronto from 2014 to 2015. And so in 2015, there was this thing going on in Toronto called the Artist Newsstand, where in Chester subway station there was an abandoned newsstand, and this performance artist was inviting different collectives to come and take over the newsstand and do performance art. And they invited us, and we were like, "Oh, that's really interesting." Except there's an access issue because, interestingly, Chester subway station was barrier free to roll into the entrance, but then you couldn't actually go up and down accessibly into the subway. There was just like stairs and an escalator. So we were like, huh, like if people are taking the subway to the event, they won't be able to get up. But then we thought about it and we were like, oh, there's a subway station, Broadview, that's 3 blocks away that does have elevators that usually work. So what we did as an intervention was we were like, okay, meet at Broadview Station. We're going to have a march. We're going to have a Crypt Magic and Revolutionary Love disabled performance art march. And this is big because at least in Toronto at that time, we didn't mostly know anyone with cars, right? Because we were all broke. But we were like, if you can't walk the 3 blocks and you're ambulatory, or if you're a chair user, we've got vans. And also, we're just going to do a big, slow, non-permitted march together. And we were just holding signs that said, like, crypt, proud to be crazy, crypt magic and love, like all of this. It was this big, slow, disabled march down the street. And then we met up in the foyer of Chester Station and we took it over without a permit. We had ASL interpreters. It was 2015, so we had Skype. We had someone holding up a laptop. And we just took over the subway station as disabled folks and deaf folks doing performance art, and it was beautiful. And um, I'm going to quickly share the slides at the end of just the storytelling, but I don't want to be like, ooh, take lemons and make lemonade, but it was like, you know, I think sometimes we think either it's bespoke access where we have everything, but that's really expensive, or well, I guess we have to leave people behind or do something that's inaccessible. And the stories I'm trying to tell are working class, wild, disabled ideas that intervene into disabled performance space in environments we don't control, which are the environments we live in, and they make something. And I love that random people taking the subway were like, what the fuck is this group of deaf and disabled people and terps and service dogs and people who brought their chairs in the subway station? And I don't know if we could do it now without the cops getting calls, because 10 years ago there was less policing in Toronto. So that's the other thing is like all this shit. This is also against like the one true God method. It's like everything we create is valuable and the conditions change, so you have to keep evolving it. But that's also part of our gift is that if we stay true to the conditions in our bodies and minds and our wild ideas, we'll keep making up shit that works, right? Okay, so one last story, and I want to trigger warn that it's heavy because it references the death of a community member. Um, so, what I want to talk about next is this performance installation I did starting 2 years ago, 2 years ago, 2 years ago, um, called the Disabled Grief Portal Altar. And I want to start by saying that crypt time is grief time. So, what does it look like to bring disabled Black and Brown grief and spirituality into a shared performance space, right? Just casual questions. Um, and grief is the ultimate chaos portal. It does not show up on time. It will fuck up all of your plans. And it's also a sacred disabled time because when it hits, nothing matters but that that person just died. It stops the clock, right? So in 2023, I got asked to perform at I Want to Be With You Everywhere, which is a disabled performance thing happening in New York City. And so far, they had one multi-day festival in 2019. And they've had two one-day summer solstice gatherings in June 2023 and 2024. And when I got asked to come, I was like, I can read poetry and I did, but I was like, I also want to make a performance altar about disabled grief and loss. Because the conditions that gathering was happening in was it was 2023 and most of us had not been in person with each other for 4 years of the pandemic. And we were not doing great. We're still not, right? Like so many people I know, including myself, had just been in as much as we could, just total lockdown and just trying to survive COVID, right? Just like not going out, like not, I don't need to tell you. And for a lot of that time, we were also grieving in isolation in lockdown. So Stacy, who we saw her image at the beginning of this talk, who I'll visually describe as a Korean white younger person wheelchair user. She was one of my best friends and comrades, and she died in 2020. Slash was murdered by the medical industrial complex. My dad died. My disabled on day disabled partnership died. Like, like so many people who I respected died. Um, and a lot of that grief we had to weather on Zoom alone, like with virtual community that is real. And I also really felt the difference when I was able to go to my friend LL's funeral memorial in 2021 when a lot of us had been able to access vaccines and we had a massed outdoor gathering in his memory. And I was like, this still is the worst thing in the world, but I'm able to be with disabled family, right, in person. And this feels different. And I was just like, okay, so, and oh, actually, before I go on, I want to name a quote from the white Jewish disabled femme writer C.K. Kaufman, where she says, so far I have been able to survive, but so many others have not been allowed to. That. So these were the conditions where we were like, we need to be together, and it's also been a minute, so we're gonna have to, it's gonna feel kind of weird being together, And it was going to be this big disabled social event. They found one of the only spaces in New York that has outdoor space that was flat and wheelchair accessible. They did virtual. I think there's some people who are at this talk who participated virtually. Um, and I just thought about like, what would it mean to make an altar as an installation about disabled, mostly Black and brown grief, right? Um, and some notes about altars. So I've built altars since I was a teenager reading witch books from the library. And when I was at my sickest and most isolated in my early 20s, I was like, I don't have anybody, but I've got a bowl of water and a candle, and I'm praying like my life depends on it to the ancestors to keep me alive. And I think altars are a space that I have used a lot as a mad person, as a sick person, and as a griever. Um, and then, starting with Mangoes with Chili, we started integrating altars into our performance spaces, and they were really kind of bootsy. It was just like, well, we've got a table and we got some post-it notes and we got some pictures of ancestors and some water. And at the time, we didn't know anyone else who was doing it, but we were just like, we want to bring spirit into the work. We want to bring a place for the audience who are part of the performance, right? As much as we are as performers, to be able to like leave their love notes and offerings and wishes and our two big shows, one was on Valentine's Day and it was about queer and trans people of color love and disaster. And the other one was around Halloween slash de los Muertos, which is a grief time for a lot of people. And for then, we were like, we want to call in the beloved dead, right? And I want to name a couple of lineage ancestors. So one is I want to quote the incredibly important Black queer performance elder Sharon Bridgeforth from her book Notes on a Jazz Aesthetic, where she says, I am deliciously crazed and obsessed with creating living arrangements of text as jazz. With my script as the score, an ensemble, and the audience, I compose ritual jazz theater, improvisation, improvis, improvisationally. I'm not pronouncing it right, sorry. Live during performance. I don't know if Sharon identifies as disabled, but she said crazed. And to me, I'm like, yeah, there's something there. And there's something about her calling on West African griot traditions of channeling of the poet and the storyteller as a channel for spirit, someone who brings the news, someone who communicates really important things in the moment to a live audience, right? And she's somebody that we worked with and also really learned from because she was teaching so many emerging queer and trans Black and brown poets and artists in the early 2000s. And yeah, so altars, not fancy, improvisational. I want to say that ritual can be a technology to suffer some energy, devotion, and focus to get something. And then there's always the question again of professionalization of, oh, you're bringing an altar to a performance space? That's cute. Is that you being a schmancy professional artist, or is that you just putting some shit on a table? Is that real art? Who gets to say, right? But I know that we were really clear about our work as performers and performance artists and our goals, where we were like, we want to create something for our people. So I'm naming this to say this is some of the histories and lineages that I brought to building this installation. And some notes about it were I was like, okay, there's one tree in the courtyard. Let's build it around there. Like, let's get up like an easy up pop-up tent from the Costco and put it up. I got some like $5 twinkle lights from Target. And then I wanted it to be collaborative, so I wanted to name Jen White Johnson, who I think is actually in the room, where I just reached out to her and was just like, hey, I love your work. Can we put up your pictures as an offering? Because she was making and still is making these beautiful, important portraits of disabled, mostly Black and brown ancestors as they die, often in really violent and oppressive ways. So, we had a portrait of Stacy. We had a portrait that Jen made of Judy Human, so bell hooks, like so many people who died at intersections of racism and ableism and sexism and all kinds of things. Um, I got those 5.99 lace curtains from IKEA because I was like, yeah, they're cute and they're easy. And if they get wrecked, I got a budget to buy flowers, and everyone was like, "Oh, you should go to the floral district." But I was like, "No, it's too crowded." So I went to the bodega around the corner, and there were these very nice Nepali family, and I was like, "Let me just buy these flowers." I'm saying this to say that disabled wild idea making is cheap and accessible, is how I value it. It's use the tools you have that you can reach. Um, a lot of the stuff was last minute for me. I gestate stuff a lot and then I go, okay, what are we doing like a week before? So I reached out to my friend Reed, who is an incredible Armenian trans working class disabled herbalist, and was like, can you donate some herbs and tinctures? And they were like, yeah. So we had those there. And there's more I could say, but I want to make sure to keep on time and also make room to have abundant time for journaling. So I can share more later, but those were some of the elements of it, and I'm going to share images in a minute. But what I want to get to is like, this is a perfect example. I had it all planned out. And, I want to be with you everywhere was so well organized. It's a crew of 6, 7 people. There was so much support. They had gotten some money, so they were like, here you go. You can buy fabric. You can do this. There were abled people, physically abled people at the space to help me unload my Honda Fit of all the bags of crap. And then it's the night before I'm supposed to go down, and I'm supposed to drive to New York from where I'm living in Western Massachusetts, and I just can't move. Like it's a 4-hour drive, and I'm like, okay, you got to get in the car, and my cat is meowing and is looking anxious, and it's hot out, and I was like, I don't know what it is, but I just literally can't move. And I'm yelling at myself, like, get up, you got to go, you can't mess things up for people. But then I was like, I'm just going to listen to it. And I messaged one of the collective members being like, I don't know what's happening, but I think I have to stay. And they were like, it's totally fine. You're not messing it up. Like, we built in crit flexibility. And then the next day, I'm like, okay, which is still the day before the show. I'm like, great. I feel better. I'm going to drive down. And then I look down at my phone around halfway in the drive, and I see that my friend Naima Niambi Lowe, who's an incredible Black disabled fat performance artist, has messaged me, called me a couple times, and then I see a text where she's like, "Hey girl, I have some news. I can't text it to you. Call me." And in this very classic Crip Brown moment, I pull over at the Dunkin' Donuts and I call Naima and I'm like, "Okay, who died?" And she's like, "Our friend Rebel completed suicide." And I was just like, And I was just like, okay. And Rebel is someone who I had known since LiveJournal, like for almost 20 years at that point. And get back in the car, I keep driving, and then I'm just like, I get to the space and I'm like, and it's the perfect storm where I'm like, wow, I was going to create this disabled grief portal for other people, but my friend just died. You know, my mixed race, queer, huge survivor friend just died. And I was like, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I'm gonna have to put I'm gonna have to print out his picture and put it on the altar. And it was also the perfect storm of like, I'm setting up the canopy, we're setting up the lights, we're hanging up the art. And I'm not alone. I'm not physically alone. I'm with my community. And at one moment, a couple hours in, I break down and I start crying. And I'm like, and I don't know if I've cried in front of other disabled kin in person for a couple years at that point because of the isolation. And I'm just like, how much more can we take? And I'm just like, these are the conditions. It's not always what's in the Google Doc. It's what happens. It's what happens in real time. And I was held, and that grief was held because of the space I created for others, but it ended up being there for me too. And the others were there for me too. And as news traveled through the Cripiverse, and as people were zooming in, I remember seeing in the comments, people like, that's Rebel's space. And people just messaging me being like, I'm really glad that that space was there to hold this really, really tragic loss, right? This tragic and complicated loss. And I was like, yep. And it's also a real motherfucker where I'm just like, God damn it. Um, that's the break, that's the break. And and then the day of the show, this white woman who's involved in the show comes up to me and is like, "Hey, I'm just wondering if you'd consider it. I think it would look so much better if you moved the artwork here." And I just let myself snap at her and I was like, "You know what? This is not abstract. Like these are my dead friends and this is a holy space. So shut the fuck up. I did not ask for your fucking opinion." And that's important because, I know that some of my look can be like, oh, I'm tough and I call people out. But like, actually, I've had to swallow it so many times in spaces and make nice. And we all have. And that was honestly one of the first times where like, I am just going to let myself not be nice. Partly because I was like, I know the collective has my back. And she apologized, and I was just like, but I was like, this is interesting because, like, I don't know if this is what you thought, but like, I think that you were used to just like, it's art, it's abstract. And I was like, no, it's actually, it doesn't look professional. It's not sanitized. It's not in a fancy museum. It's still real. It's more real than some of that stuff is. And it is spiritual. And it's not something where you come in and you're like, well, I'm just going to do a critique of this gallery showing. I'm like, no, these are my friends. It's not just like, let's move it 30 degrees to the right. It's like, no, like they're here, right? Like, so that's an intervention. And then some brief things that I want to say as disabled design aspects of that space is that, I mean, as an autistic person, this wasn't planned, but I was like, oh, there's a sensory room inside the space where you could go to with masks on, which was beautifully, beautifully designed, and I loved it. And I also know that for me as an autistic witness to art and performance and also performer, sometimes I personally don't always want to be in the sensory room. I want to be able to watch the show, be in the show. I just don't want to be surrounded by 300 people. So there was something about this canopy with the fabric, with the shade. There's places to sit, which there were in the other space too. There's candles, there's flowers. It's a grief space that I was like, oh, this is functioning as like a secondary kind of sensory room space where we could witness the show and also be a little removed, a little veiled, a little between the worlds. And I was like, I'm like, I came up with that. I didn't know I was going to do that. Um, so these are some stories, and they're not, I really want to say, I'm not offering them as just do it like Leah does it, because fuck that. I mean, what do I know? But I want everyone to know that you can do it like you would do it, right? And I want to end before I go into, I'm going to end with this quote and then share some images and describe them. And then we're going to have some journal time before we break at 5 minutes past. Um, my friend, the Black disabled queer performance artist and dancer Neve, Neve, once said, "Everything I do is an experiment that might fail." And that's a real fist in the eye of all these abled standards that we are forced to measure ourselves against. And it's so liberating to be like I know for years, whenever I planned everything, I was like, I feel such responsibility. And I also am up against so much imposter syndrome and being in spaces that are looking at me like, why do we pay you to do this? Like, who the fuck are you? You just look like some freak, So I'm like, oh, I have to be 110%. I have to be perfect. And if anything goes wrong, it's going to be my fault. When I first heard Neve saying that, I was like, that really opened things up to be like, this is an experiment. This space we're in together, it's an experiment. It's absolutely probable that somebody in the space is like, hey, I don't like the way the access is going, or this part didn't work. And we can just be like, okay, great, let's evolve, right? Which is also a complete different paradigm than the access scarcity paradigm of abled world, which is like, we're going to give you one crappy disabled parking space that has a truck parked in it that you can't get into, and you got to say thank you. And instead to be like, we're going to do something that grows more and more abundantly every year. It's like a garden that you keep building every year and you put more compost in that can keep getting more and more crip, more and more neurodivergent, more and more deaf as we learn ourselves more with each other, as we're allowed. I'm sorry, I'm going off script, so I will pause because I don't want to make work. But there's that disabled phrase, the dignity of risk, which says that those of us who are disabled, deaf, neurodivergent, we get to have the dignity of not being protected and being able to try some shit and get it wrong, and not be wrapped in cotton wool where we don't have any autonomy. And this feels like part of it. Like, let's try some shit and fail and then not be failures ourselves, but like learn from it and make something amazing and disabled out of it. So I'm gonna share some images and describe them that illustrate all this stuff I've been talking about. So bear with me. Oh my God, did it go away? Hold on. Firefox, where are you? Oh yeah, here we go. Okay. So I just want to show you how ad hoc all this stuff is. So this is an image. This is a screenshot from a 2015 Facebook post on Sick and Stable Queers where it says, it's me going, hey, Toronto, Performance Disability Art is throwing a little Crip showcase at the artist newsstand, including a Crip parade to the actual spot because it's in an inaccessible station. We're marching from Broadview Station 3 blocks away. Away is misspelled, which says elevators throughout come through. And there's images of, a variety of 3 black, 2 brown, and 1 white disabled and deaf performers. And it just says Disability Art Showcase, Crip Magic and Revolutionary Love. And it doesn't show, but there was like 230 people who showed up. Wild, right? Um, and these are just some photographs of us. Like that's Cyrus and me and Larry and people just like posing and Mel posting. It was so cold. Okay, it was October 24th. I had 3 jackets on. I was so tired. We're like grinning wildly in front of this newsstand. And it's a bad cell phone picture, but this is the documentation we have. There's an image of me with my cane speaking, performing to some people who are sitting down in the subway station. Um, yeah, and just some different images of like us taking up space in the station. I will share this in the Discord later. I also want to show a brief, just to show what we did on No Money. We did a show called Crip Your World, an intergalactic queer POC sick and disabled extravaganza. I will just briefly say there's like, oh God, like 15 people performing. Um, it's in 2014. It's at the library. It's at the Palmerston Library in Toronto because they had this theater in the basement. Where we have like the Palmerston Theater is wheelchair accessible, bathrooms tight for scooter users, free childcare is offered on site in a dedicated childcare room, staffed with volunteers. Please RSVP if possible. ASL by Tala Giali and Bonnie Lynn Baker. Please come fragrance free. All videos are captioned. Doors will open at 6:30. Show will begin at 7 and end at 9. We put that in because we know that people use Access-a-Ride, so they have to book their van. Um, we just did it. And these are some brief images of different mangoes with chili performances, like just stuff we did. Reclaiming the Rights was a show that we did in 2012. That was about, we really were like, what are queer and trans people of color rituals? we use the phrase like wheelchair and chemically accessible. No one turned away for lack of funds. I'm gonna do brief image descriptions because I want to just like there's too much. I did too many images, and I want to make sure. I'm actually gonna skip through this because journaling. Um, but I want to end with these are two images I'll share and describe of the disability grief portal altar. So, it's dinky. It's a table, and there's a tree, and you can see Jen White Johnson and Tina Zavatsanos and other artists' beautiful artwork strung on this clothesline. Um, there's candles, there's flowers, there's a Black Latina trans person with their back to the camera with a baseball cap and a mask on, looking at the images. There's candies. There's someone seated, another Black genderqueer person who's using a rollerator, who's rolled up to the altar. I'm going to side note and say, I think as disabled folks, the right to have sacred space that we make on our own terms and to have it anywhere we want it to be is really important. And that includes it being an art. So yeah, it's just a table and some intention and some art. And this is a close-up of the images on the table, of stuff on the table. There's the aforementioned $5 IKEA lace curtains and images of Carrie Ann Lucas, beloved ancestor, white, Latina, fat femme, wheelchair user, trach user, an image of Rebel, Sidney Fayola Black, and his beloved cat, oranges, a bundle of rosemary, candles, some caramels, some of those little teas that Reed made in cups. And people had just, like, there's someone who just ran up, Bob, miss you. People were able to, like, write down the names of their dead. So, yeah, sometimes you just do shit. That's what it is. It's just doing shit. And we have 5 minutes before break, so I'm going to. That's a lot. So I'm just going to encourage people to take a breath and or whatever you want. And I'm going to name the journal exercises out loud, and maybe they could also be put in Discord or in chat. And also, these are take homes, so I'll just say them, and we can. I mean, it's 5 minutes. We're not going to do all of them. But the exercises I wanted to leave you with to think about are what's a wild disabled idea or two that you've had? What's a time that you tried to do something according to plan and it fucked up? And what did you do then? And how did you feel about it? How did you crip innovate out of that space? And finally, what's a wild disabled idea that you have now that you might want to put into practice? And it looks like Moya's sharing these to everybody. Thank you so much. And do what you can with the 5 minutes we have. And also, I really hope people will do them as not homework, and just have those. Also, just have, whether you journal about them or not, just have those questions sit with you. And I really want you to tap into your own power and the wild disabled things that only you can do that aren't going to be what anyone else can do. So, yeah, that's what I got. Thanks for letting me talk. Yeah, so we'll just journal for 4 or 5 minutes and then take a break. The break's at 5 minutes past, is that right?
Yes, but I'm wondering how you feel about maybe turning on some music for as people are journaling and then having that music take us into the break as well.
I love that. And I just want to say for anyone for whom music is like an access no, you can just feel free to mute it. But yeah, that sounds great. I love that you played 9 to 5 to bring me in. And I'll be right back. I'm going to get a notebook so I can journal as well.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, everybody. So we'll take till 11:10 a.m. That is Central Time, or till 12, and then 12:10 for those who are in East Coast time zone. Thanks, everybody.
Who took the bomb? Every day You should come and build with me. I think we should link up. You should come and build with me. I think we should link up. You should come and build with me. I think we should link up. You should come and build with me. I think we should link up. Yeah. We can link, we can build, we can talk, we can chill, we can do what you like. We can link, we can build, we can talk, we can chill, we can do what you like. Yeah. There go to my city, queen of the block. Yeah, I can make it stack, it won't ever dry. Creating something special, orange, green, and yellow, purple, red. Building up an empire, taking over the entire world. So many pieces, leave them all speechless. You can never teach this, on to each is. Use your imagination, get your education, build your foundation. Want a future, make one. We can link, we can build, we can talk, we can chill, we can do what you like. We can link, we can build, we can talk, we can chill, we can do what you like. Yeah. You should come and build with me. I think we should link up. You should come and build with me. I think we should link up. You should come and build with me. I think we should link up. You should come and build with me. I think we should link up.
نفر از دور داره میخونه آسمون وحشت ما سفره تاره شرم از این کابوس شرم از این افسوس شرم از این رنج بیهوده پرده آخر زندگی از سر روی تلی از خاکستر از گلوی تو صدای ما بلا چاو بلا چاو بلا چاو 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 میپریم از خواب یه شب مهتاب یکی میگه آی آدم ها یا همه با هم یا همه تنها ما که بیدار
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to begin with our Q&A. And before we take a question from the audience here, I'm going to use my convener privilege to ask a first question. I just really appreciated so much what you shared with us today, Leah, and it has me once again thinking about how we get to the world we actually want to live in. And part of that is taking these wild ideas and allowing them the space to move. And your prompt reminded me of this project with Amy. Like, this was one of our wild ideas that came to fruition. And part of that was creating labs for exactly what you discussed, the opportunity for things to fail and to experiment. So lab feels like a really important metaphor. So I guess my question for you is, how are you feeling about maybe this new generation of DJ folks and like wanting to experiment and fail. Because I think there's something maybe about, we've talked about this a little bit, people feeling okay to fail and do that experimentation.
Yeah, thank you. I love that question. And thank you for just naming, you and Amy's lab as like, it's a lab. Like maybe we blow things up in the lab. Who knows? Let's try it. Yeah, we have talked about this. I want to start by saying I in no way know most or even a little bit of like a lot of like younger emergent DJ folks or DJ folks who are older who are just getting into DJ, right? But so there's a lot I don't know, but one thing that I guess, well, two things. One, I mean, I do see like a tremendous amount of like innovation and people just being like, let's just go, let's just do it. I love that. And something that I do also witness is, sometimes when I'm talking to people who are, age-wise younger than me and getting into DJ, there's this, I really hear them share about this fear of if I try something and it's not perfect, people are going to come for me, or like, can you tell me specifically how to do it right? And I'm like, well, I can like give you some technical advice. Like I'm like, yeah, here's a way of addressing this access issue or this, this is a way you might want to think about like scheduling out support for yourself if you're running an event or time or things like that. But I guess something that comes up for me sometimes is like I do feel like something that we had on our side when I was coming into disability justice in the aughts and the early 2010s was even though social media was a thing, we did not feel surveilled the same way. Like, I mean, and surveillance was also a thing, right? But like, I mean, Sick and Disabled Queers, which is that Facebook group I mentioned, we were wide open. Like we were aware that Facebook was evil, but we were like, this is a technology that we're going to use to connect as long as we can all of these disabled folks, in the Maldives, in Vancouver, in Chicago, in rural New Mexico, in our beds and our Section 8 apartments, and people shared very candidly and honestly about stuff they were going through. And, whether it was body stuff, mind stuff, mental health stuff, like real personal stuff. And from that place of honesty, and honestly, I mean, people were dealing with isolation where they're like, I'm the one radical, disabled, queer, brown person I know in X community. Um, but also, I think even when people had local communities, sometimes they were like, it's so small. Like, I want to reach to other people who aren't just in my little area, but I can't go to conferences because they're inaccessible. And anyway, like that openness created, to me, it created a lot of richness of relationship, of practice, of like, we're creating theory, but it's not academic. And we didn't have, in my experience, a sense of like, oh, Big Brother's watching, and that also everything's being recorded. And if I say something that's a hair off, people are going to be like, And I think a lot of people now are like, period. And with the shift in social media towards, the thing that happened a while back where you're not seeing your friends, you're seeing what the algorithm wants to show you. And it's really doing mind control and manipulation. And it's also trying to sell yourself and just aggressively data mining and stealing. Um, I think that, people of my generation were able to like use the internet. It's like that Prince quote my friend likes. It's like, like don't like is the internet using you? I'm messing it up. But it's like, yeah, like get on the computer, but don't let the computer get on you. We were able to get on the computer and use it for ourselves. And then there's a tipping point now where, like many of us, we're on these devices right now. But the sense of being monitored and surveilled and is someone going to grab something out of context and like feed it into AI or feed, all of the things, it just makes everyone a lot more afraid. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't have a magic solution, but what I do witness and what I am practicing more is I'm doing a lot more stuff online than I used to, and the stuff I do online I'm much more selective and it's much more carefully held. Like it's spaces like this where I really am like it's disabled Black and brown folks who I really trust the intention and the container of how we're doing it, how you're making this space. But a lot of my stuff, it's me in the community garden. It's me having a conversation with my friends. It's like us, it's like analog zine stuff. Or I'm going to share some, but not all of it. And I'm much more protective of like, I really need that private space to be able to have the wild idea, even if the wild idea then goes out into the wild internet. So it's like, it's that quote from Essex Hemphill, protect your magic. It's like, I think that we had more spaciousness to do a kind of like, oh, we all get to connect and it's so quick and it's so magical. Like, Moya, I'm thinking of times that I'm thinking of the first time we met in person at the AMC where we were just like, oh my God, it's you. And then, so much of the stuff, the connections we had with Stacey and with other folks in like Speak Women of Color media, which I wasn't a part of, but when I witnessed the relationships y'all made, where you lived in physically different spaces, but you were like radical Black and brown women, um, doing like zines and blogs and media work who were like, ooh, like power of an ice monkey, let's connect, where it was just like that quick speed access of internet that was beautiful. I really mourn the times where that felt safer because that quickness and that connection across virtual distance is some disabled magic. And I long for and I hope that some of what might happen is that we are able to create online and virtual spaces because we need these as access tools that we control and that are safer and more secure and that aren't data mined. And I mean, I'll say, I live in Philly, which is the city of 1,000 person signal threads, which is very overwhelming. But like, I do see the ways in which communities are able to do some of that in a space that's like not corporate internet the same way, and that's a little bit more private, and where people are still like, hey, this isn't vetted, so be careful, right? But like still, it's someone being like, you got any Ativan? You got an air purifier? Anyone want to play with me on the ukulele? Whatever. And there's that coming together. And I'm really curious to see what I've heard tell of especially a lot of younger Generation Z and Generation Alpha, where they're like, we don't have Instagram, we don't want our phones, we want paperbacks. Like we want analog media again, because fuck this. And I'm like, yeah, like talk to a 50-year-old zine stir. Like I want to be in this with you. And I also want to know what we invent that we haven't yet. Yeah, that's what I got.
I love that. And just a funny thing about magic is I wasn't in Speak either,
You
but
weren't?
I thought you were in Speak. So I
Uh-uh.
mean
No.
that also speaks
Oh, God.
to the moment
Yeah.
possible because even though we weren't in that collective, there was a cadre of us who were all operating around the same time in the same space, and there was overlap. That
Yeah.
was possible.
I love that.
Here's the first question from an anonymous attendee. I came into this space very upset from writing letters about impending disability cuts in my country, and I really appreciate how this has helped me think back to what is in my power, not waiting for permission or funding. But I still feel this tension of doing things being used against me to take
Mhm.
away disability support and benefits and treatments. I'm not the only disabled creative I know struggling with this. Do you have any thoughts about that balancing act? And um, yeah.
I do. I read that question. I was so grateful for it. Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think about is pseudonyms. And it actually goes back to something that, a lot of people I'm in co-dreaming and collaboratorship talk about who remember the old internet where they were like, yeah, it wasn't linked to your government name and your social security number. Like you could have personas and you could like go into chat rooms and play and you could like try things out and you could be a different person, right? And for me, and I think that it's also interesting where I think there's like a disabled creative, like career pathway that's out there now that's like, yeah, blow up on the internet with your name. And then, who you are is who you are all the time. And then you're going to get this grant and you're going to do this stuff. And I was like, I mean, sure, but also maybe not. So, like, my name that I live under and I perform under is not my government last name, which is a Dutch colonial last name from the fucking Dutch East India Company of the guy who raped my great great grandmother. And I have never legally changed it because my grandmother was always like, you keep a couple passports around, girl. And also, I was like, I don't need the name that my last name, which is both of my great grandmother's last names, to be my government name. I don't. So some of those angry letters I write and the name that's on my Medicaid, that's not my chosen name. And I mean, it's not foolproof. Like I've been doxxed. Like I think that there's ways in which if somebody really wanted to, they could figure out it's the same person. So there's maybe no perfect thing, and what I'm sharing, like that might not work for everybody. But that's one example. And I've increasingly thought, I mean, I joked with a friend. I was like, do I need to fake my own death and come up with a new person who can like be real honest, But I do think about like, something I go back to a lot is actually the tradition in Sri Lanka of during the Civil War, but also after, anonymous Sri Lankan feminist and Sri Lankan feminist theater artists who only use their first name. Like Sumathi, who is like such a beloved, important Sri Lankan radical feminist theater artist who is making street theater about the disappearances, the war, feminism, domestic violence. She used her first name only. And I think that's also really, it's an intervention because it's like, it's not about blowing up and getting famous. It's about, no, it's tactical. Like she was like, I want to get my work out there and I don't want to get put in a white van. Right. So I think there's a lot we can learn from our own histories as Black, Indigenous, POC, as disabled folks of lying and, being like, we've got one name and face for the government and then we've got others. And we actually don't need, the goal is not fame. The goal is actually to do the work. And so maybe we use our first name, maybe we use a different first name. Like maybe, you write those letters to the government, you don't have to put your government name on it. You can just be like concerned citizen or like Lisa Davis or whatever. And I also want us to really continue to be creative about, I think there can be real impact in coming up with a persona or a pseudonym or an artist name. And like that's the person who's out there doing the artwork. Or maybe you have more than one, right? Like, I mean, Anne Rice wrote under pseudonyms. If she can do it, why can't we? And it is a little bit of a resistance to the idea of like, no, you must be legible and you must be one person. And it actually makes me think, as someone who's plural, who has this association. I mean, my parts don't write my poems all the time, but I'm just like, who says that we have to be just one person? Like, fuck that. And so, yeah, disabled creative. Yeah. And protection magic. Like, I think a lot about, I put on protection oils before I did this talk. And I do that. And I also have one hell of a security document for my stalkers. And I think that we can invoke magic to be like, keep me safe as I am. Because I think here's the thing. And sorry, I'm doing my famous Leah, like, let's answer one question with 10 minutes. But like, I've seen a tendency in the States in the last, I've got to say since Trump got elected again, where a lot of people were like, we have to go totally offline, like, burn everything, don't do anything public, it's not safe. And there's truth to that. But then, when the rebellions erupted in LA earlier this month, I was like, there's truth to that. And there's also a real need to get loud and to get visible and to get big. And I think we need a diversity of tactics. So I don't think the solution is just to not publish anything, not say anything, not do anything publicly. But I think that we need to have a diversity of tactics. I think we need to build our allyship so we're not alone, right? I think that we need to I think about Black feminist security work like Vision Change Win, right? And like their toolkit Get in Formation, where they're like, yes, we're visible, and yes, we're vulnerable as like Black, queer, and trans disabled folks in the street. But the answer is not always to just stay home, though often we do resist from home. But it's when we're in the street, how do we create snake formations? How do we create like, accessible security teams that are really innovative in pushing back against the cops and the fascists? Right? So that stuff. We're more creative than them. Like we got more creative and we got the ancestors. And we got fuck it. So those are some tools we can use.
I love that. And I'm always excited to hear magic invoked as a tool for us at this moment. And I think it's really important hearing you say that as we're talking about disability too, because magic has been used against us in not the best ways. There's a couple of questions here that are asking about finding community in isolation. So I'm going to read two questions that are aligned. I'm trying to come out of 4+ years of disability isolation, having a difficult time finding community online or in sharing and building, but have no idea where to find these resources. Any tips for a socially awkward autist wanting to connect? And there's a question that's similar to that, which is, Do you have any encouragement for us sick and disabled folks trying to find community amidst the ongoing COVID pandemic? It feels like there are so many disability spaces that end up having no precautions and thus are inaccessible to many.
Wow, I'm so sorry to hear that. I know I'm privileged and lucky because I live in a city where that's not true. I went to an all-masked queer and trans BIPOC porn festival 2 weekends ago. All-masked, air purifiers. That's why I live in Philly. And I'm saying that not to be like, sucks to be you, but just to be like, anything can get changed, right? It takes work, it takes willingness, but anything can get changed, right? So I guess I would say to start with the first question, I feel you. One thing, I started unmasking. I realized I was autistic. Oh, it's going to be 10 years next year. Yay, happy birthday to me. Um, I'm not saying it's easy or that there haven't been lots of bumps, but I have, God, I feel like it's like a twofer where like part of my journey has been at times to be like, yep, I'm just alone with my cat in the books and walking alone. And you know what? That was me as an autistic kid too, so fuck it. I'm gonna lean into that. And also with some of the in-person community I've been making, I kind of leaned into like let it be awkward, which was real scary and which isn't a guaranteed success. But I was like, what if I dip my toe into what if it can just be awkward and it's okay? Or if it's not okay, all right, it's not okay, fuck it. But I'm not masking because I know that for me, not to get into my whole psychoanalyst of my whole life, but like for a lot of my 20, but my 30s especially, I was really like, love me. I'm gonna mask a lot. I want to be cool. Please love me, And I would like, I masked a lot. I was like a caregiver. I was like the funny guy. I hid all my weird autism nerd shit, from most people. And no disrespect to that past self, but like that didn't lead to a lot of friendships that necessarily lasted like because they were shallow, they weren't really me, and we've all been there out of isolation and loneliness. And I think where I'm at now is like real quality over quantity, where I'm like I would rather have a handful of people I can be weird with and we can be awkward together, and if there's a bump, like I've had some newer friendships lately where I'm like, oh wow, there was a bump, but like it's not the autistic thing where you fuck up once and that's it, you never get a second chance. I'm like, oh, like we were mad at each other, but you still want to go to Target? What the fuck? Okay. I'd rather have fewer of those friendships that are better than more that are shittier. And I also kind of embrace that like it takes time. Like for me, out of my own trauma and my own orphanhood, I would always just be like, let me jump real quick to intimacy. And it's been real counterintuitive feeling being like, oh, this is slow and we don't automatically trust each other because I had a real queer, trans, BIPOC, chosen disabled family. Yay, we're gonna love each other forever, instantaneously. That sometimes lasted and sometimes it just blew up. So this has been real. I told someone beloved lately, I'm really grateful for how slow and sometimes distrusting you are because we're actually building the last and it actually feels like a rebellion in a time where everything feels like urgent must go. And that's not to say it doesn't feel awkward. I think for me, like, and then I want to go to the second question about like the disabled spaces with no COVID safety. I'm so sorry. That sucks so bad. I think my answer is always like if you can find the one other person or the two other people and start small and be like, we are going to have a masked outdoor, we drink tea 6 feet from each other or something, or we're going to get masked and we're going to watch a movie at my house with the air purifier, or we're going to watch movies online together, or like talk about gaming, or we've got this Discord, or we go for a slow, strong walk together and we sit and we do masking and you build the relationship slow. I think that there's a lot that can come from that in like 6 months, a year, 2 years. And it also makes me go back to like, wild disabled idea over a decade ago time where one of my stories is also like Sins Invalid comes to Toronto. And that was such a wild time where like it was 2012 and it was the period where Sins was starting to get a lot of name recognition. So people would be like, can you bring the whole show to wherever? And Patty would be like, well, do you have $20,000 and 2 weeks? Because we don't fuck around with interpretation and like you're gonna have to pay for people's PCAs to fly and some of us can't fly and this and that. And so what ended up happening was like the Leroy and Leah show where we were the two walkies. So it'd be the two of us and like DVDs of the videos. And so we would do, but Toronto, yeah, I don't know. Long story short, we had like a smaller version of Sins at a Toronto space. And then after that, there was just like three or four disabled black and brown femmes, chronically ill and disabled black and brown femmes that were like, can we just get together and talk? And we just lay in somebody's bed on ice packs and we discussed matters. And a lot of art making, relationships, career came out of just that talk. And it was four people, it was four people who were isolated. So, and I think there can be a sense now of like, oh, there's some massive disabled party out there somewhere and I'm not in it, so I must be doing it wrong. And I think there are more disabled spaces than there were through work, but there's also a lot of disabled spaces that are two or three people. And then a lot of us who are even in like the party of this, we navigate isolation in our lives in different ways too. So anyway, TLDR, start slow. You know what you want. Like make the space that you need. Start with one or two people. Um, and you hit a wall, be like, all right, that didn't work, try something else. And know that it's possible. Like, I think I'm like a Philly evangelicist, but there's a piece that a group I'm part of, Philly Breathes, which is a Black and Brown disabled founded mass distribution group. We just wrote in the Abolition Journal where we were like, we organized slow and thank God, but we also talked about part of a lot of Philly is a black working class poor abandoned city, and that's not romantic. Like there's a lot of violence and a lot of systems failing here. And then the thing that comes out of it though is that people here, like generational Philadelphians, are like, yeah, the systems don't work, so we share what we have. And like one of the reasons I really value here is that black and brown folks who are, sixth generation Philadelphian, not on some activist thing, they never stop wearing masks on public transit because they're like, we know it smells and we know it smells like piss and viruses. So that's an example of like, in places of oppression and scarcity, there's also possibility. Right. And it's not like I'm not saying it in some kind of like, oh, everything just works out great. Like I'm not romanticizing it, but there's possibility in absence to make what you want. That's my speech. Yeah, and just be fucking awkward together. Be two awkward weirdos, like reading a weird book. That's what I like.
I
That's
love
my
that.
chapel room, which is like long hair, no bra. That's my type. I'm like awkward as fuck, like depressed. That's my type.
Love that. And it speaks to another question kind of on the same line about finding community. And I think you answered that beautifully. I will suggest also, Jamie, think about Karis Books as a place in Georgia where a lot of these conversations are happening as another place to look. So where are the queer feminist bookstores that also might have an opening for these kind of conversations? So to return to wild disabled ideas, someone says that you delivery conveys such confidence.
Ah,
How do you get your confidence to start with these ideas? How do you know which best ones, what are the best ones to pursue? And then relatedly, there's a question, what wild disabled idea are you inspired by or rooting for now, currently? You.
me, this guy.
Yeah. Mhm.
Love it. There's this concept I wrote about in The Future is Disabled that I jokingly but not call the audacity of autism, where I'm just like, it's that thing I said before of like when you have nothing to lose, there's no place to go but up. So I think a lot of where I've gotten my confidence, which like wow, also I'm not a confident person, like actually, like I'm a very insecure, like shy guy. So like just know that like most people can't tell when you're not confident, like they really can't. And it's also okay to be like, I feel timid about this, or like, I don't know, or like, I feel vulnerable. It's okay to bring that into a space. But going back, like, I think a lot of my root comes from being like newly really sick and like super depressed and suicidal in my early 20s. No friends, no social capital, no nothing, like, no money. Just like, fuck it. Like, I might die. I might as well write these poems. I might as well. I mean, I was focused on survival, but I also was just like, yeah, like I might as well just go for it. I've already kind of seen the worst. which can always be worse. But like I was just like, it's already been bad. Like, fuck it. Um, I will say that gets more complicated. Like I just turned 50 2 months ago, and I've been really sitting with how when I was younger, death was all around. So I just really had to like just jump off the cliff, who cares? And now that I actually do have something to lose, I am more like, oh God, because like which is one of the gifts of having survived that's complicated, right? Um, but I guess the too long didn't read is just sometimes you just throw some shit at the wall and see what sticks, and you don't know if it's gonna work. And you kind of hold your own hand and be like, yeah, it might really suck if it doesn't work and people are mad at me. But you know what? We're going to try this and we'll do the best we can. And like, you get to make a mistake, which can also be healing for us, like, children of immigrants. I'll just name for myself, we're never allowed to make a mistake. We always, like, I would get the 98. My dad would be like, where's the other 2 points? Despite the fact that he's learning disabled and he absolutely flunked out of school. Um, you know, um, it was really healing for me to be like, you don't actually have to it's not, the choices aren't either be the best little person in the world or you're shit. Like you get to do a 78, and it's still going to be better than most white, abled, male, cis nonsense out there. Um, I don't know what the best one is. I just try shit, but I do go with like, that feels good. I'm excited about that. Oh my God. I think for some of them, having collaborators helps. Like with Crips for eSIMs, I think that was me and Alice and Jane on a text thread, and we all have different roles. Like, I mean, Alice is just back from being on medical leave, like really seriously for a bunch of weeks. But she's like, I made the watermelon graphic again, and she has Disability Visibility Project as a platform. And I'm just like, I guess I got some followers on the internet, so I can like put it out there and then we get donations. And then Jane is just like a fucking neurodivergent wizard where, I mean, the number of spreadsheets, I'm just like, bruh, and the Discord and the like bringing in volunteers and finding people. But I feel like we hype each other up and we've totally had to problem solve. We got like $20,000 in the hole at one point, and we were just like, oh shit, we have to keep we got to keep these eSIMs on. And I wrote Macklemore, like this is the thing, I wrote Macklemore and he didn't write me back, but I was like, okay, I have his email address. Like, let's see, maybe he'll give us money. It didn't happen. I'm like, Macklemore, if you're listening, please donate. Sorry. Um, so yeah, I think there's something healing about also trying things they don't work out all the time, and we get to fail as disabled people and not be canceled. And what's a wild disabled idea I'm excited about right now? Well, yeah, and it's something I'm really nervous about actually. So as some people may have heard of, so when Stacey Park Milburn passed 5 years ago, one of my big griefs in there was that she was working on her first book when she passed and she didn't get a chance to complete it. And part of that was that she had a full-time day job. She had like 17 organizing jobs. She was managing her disability and having cancer. Like she was, all this stuff. And I mean, even when people bugged her and were like, please fundraise to buy yourself some time to write, she was like, okay, I'm going to donate half of it to Moms for Housing. And we were like, girl, like you're raising $200 for yourself. Like you need more time. So long story short, like one of the things that when I was in immediate grief, I was like, I'm gonna make somehow a writing residency for queer and trans, disabled, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And it's been 5 years and it has failed so many times. Like it was supposed to happen last year, and then the space was like, the water stopped working. And I was like, okay, you're no. And then we were going to be in Nova Scotia this year. And then the residents were like, beautiful, accessible residency space. And then the residents were like, hey, with all the border violence, we're not worried about going into Canada. We're worried about coming back. So we rescheduled it again. And as Moya was instrumental in making happen, it's happening. The residency is happening in a week at the Love Building in Detroit, Michigan. Um, and so it's just a space for disabled, queer, trans, BIPOC writers to have uninterrupted space and time to write and be fed and have like a bougie, accessible apartment hotel space and and just be able to exhale and breathe and, write together. And it's like, it's two people and me. It's small because that's what we had the money and capacity for. And I'm super nervous that something's going to go wrong. Like I had a panic attack all weekend being like, the van's gonna fuck up, like something's gonna happen at the hotel, like what, like all this. And honestly, this space that we're in together really helped me just be like, breathe, like Stacey's proud of you. you can't control what the cops at the hotel do, but you gotta just do the best you can and know that you're gonna problem solve because you come from a lineage of disabled folks who improvised. Like Stacy, there's that story where she's like, yeah, when there's like a little curb or a couple steps, I take my sneakers off and I use that as a ramp and I just roll over it. No one taught her that. She figured that out. That's what we do. That's what all of us do in real time is we just figure shit out. So I'm excited about that. And then the big thing, my wild disabled dreaming was that I love Detroit. I'm so excited. I live in Philly and I was like, and Philly is great and Philly is so air polluted. And I was like, and I was realizing, I was like, oh, it's nerve-wracking having the space be in Detroit, like 8 hour drive away. I can't physically go to check it out before I get there. And I was like, and there's something that I still want to hold on to about having something that's more in nature in a rural area. So I have this longer term dream where I'm like, I want to find a spot that's an hour or two from Philly that's in the woods, that's maybe not a super white people are going to kill us place if that exists, or somewhere on that scale, where it could just be like ranch house, no stairs, outbuilding where disabled BIPOC folks can go and just be in the trees and write. Because I think, Chris Rogers is a Black organizer here who we were in a study group last week about Rashida Phillips' amazing book, Dismantling the Master's Clock, which I really am just such a fan of. And he was just talking about being place-based and how he was just like, yeah, like, being physically in Philly at the Fresh Grocer and talking to people on my block is so important. I was like, yeah, that. And the number one thing that's helping me stay in a good place spiritually, in my soul right now with fascism, climate, everything, is anytime I'm on land. Like, I volunteer at I don't know if I volunteer. I help out once in a while at Deep Space Mine 215, which is a Black queer mad person led community garden close by, and just like putting stuff in the soil with other folks in that space is a real blessing where I'm just like, yep, we just planted some tomatoes. So I think there's something about connection to land, whether we're indigenous to it, displaced to it, settlers on it, enslaved folks, descendants of enslaved folks who were brought there, some or all of the above. But relating to land is really crip, and we get taken away from that. So that's my dream. Like two flat houses, woods, we don't get murdered. It's not like what happens to Acorn in Parable of the Talents. Yeah.
I I love that. We are almost at time for this point, but I want to ask a couple of things together, and you can pick what you want to answer. There's a question about consuming. So sometimes what is accessible to us isn't often the best in terms of the ethical production. How do we hold those things in tension without throwing disabled people under the bus for using the tools that they have accessible to them right now? And then to your point about having a guide on accessible spaces in Toronto, do you know if something like that exists in the US or any tips on starting a resource like that for venues? And then one that is, I think, can be answered. You mentioned Sharon Bridgeforth. What's the name of the book, Notes of Jazz? And we'll stop there.
Okay. Here it is. Oh my goodness. So it might need to be reposted, but I'm just going to share in chat real quick. Is chat working? Oh, my computer's getting weird. I might have to share it later. Am I frozen, guy? Just to check.
No, you're
Second.
not
Okay.
frozen.
Okay. So I'm gonna stick. Oh, but something weird's happening. Um, I'm so sorry. I wanted to try and cut and paste in chat Sarah Pinder's Toronto accessible venues Google Doc, but my computer is freezing, so it won't let me. But I could share it in Discord later. I just want to say it's literally a Google Doc. It's literally a Google Doc, and we used Ramp Vancouver, which was a project started by like one trans white fat power chair using guy on social disability. Oh, it's up. Okay, I can cut and paste. Can I cut and paste? No, it's being weird. I'll do it later.
It's
But
it's already in the chat. Angela put it
okay.
there.
Okay, great. Oh, thank you so much. Oh yeah, Angela, of course you would know about it. But they use Ramp Vancouver's access audit templates and would just go to spaces and have the template and a measuring tape and like be like, okay, what's here? So I just want to share that like For the whole United States, I don't know if that exists, but like locally, I would just really ask around and be like, what's the local guide? And if there isn't one, if that's a project you want to take on, yourself or other people, like you can get different access audit templates and just start small. I mean, I think even just having a document that has 6 venues is a lot better than none. I also wanted to shout out Carolyn Lazard's Access Guide, Access in the Arts, A Promise and a Practice, which I believe is up at a promise and a practice dot something. But Carolyn Lazard is Carolyn, Lazard, Lazard. They are an incredible Haitian American disabled artist. And that is one really thorough guide specifically for access practices in the arts that you can use as a template. Um, yeah, and then in terms of the consumption question, I got no easy answers. I really don't. Like I think that some of the principles I move on are just, and this is just me personally, is we can't always afford the hand-woven worker-owned co-op fabric, you know, and that's not a failing on us. That's a failing on capitalism and ableism and racism and all the things. Um, I know that I've had personal moments where I'm just like, yeah, I just can't stomach buying shit on Amazon right now. And then there's times where I'm like, I'm in a pickle and I really need to replace I had to replace my filter on my air purifier the other day because we've had like 3 weeks of bad air in Philly. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like it's either Target or Amazon. And I don't want to go to Target either. And it's back ordered. So I'm like, I'm gonna give money to the evil fucking empire. But I'm not the evil empire. The evil empire is the evil empire. And I just want to name that I think that we need to not throw disabled people under the bus who are working class and poor for doing what's accessible for us, which involves engaging in industrial capitalism. And we need to collectively build strategies where, I mean, when there's a worker co-op that makes the air filters out of seaweed and I can go trade some lentils or a tarot card reading for it, I will use that filter, but that's not here yet. And that's not my fault. And also, I'm a spoons limited person. So I don't then have to somehow stop sleeping to make that happen if that's inaccessible. I'm doing what I can. We actually had this debate in a mega mask block Discord I was in because a lot of how we were getting masks was oh God, like, all these state governments in the US are dumping masks now and like auctioning them off on like the govdeals.org website because they're like, who needs masks anymore? So we're getting them cheap. I got a box of like 480 N95s for $40 and I'm just like, you motherfuckers, you need this right now, but okay. And I think there was one point where someone was like, "Ooh, I'm putting up this document that like was like a National Institute for Health document, early pandemic 2020 about using like seaweed or something else, like at home N95 creation out of like organic materials." And I was like, "This is so cool. I'm so hyped for that." And then someone was like, "And also, there are pallets of PPE that are sitting in container ships that are already made that we need to fucking liberate or get access to just give out." And it's both and. It's both and because industrial capitalism is evil and it has made all this shit. And what I am in the both and of is like, I want us to distribute, like with Philly Breathes, we distribute stuff for free so that you're not having to spend $20 on 3 N95s at the drugstore if they have them, because they surely do not cost that much. And I also want a reaching towards of like, yeah, let's make them out. Let's make all these materials out of things that are not killing the planet and make them free or cheap. And we're in the along, we're in the in between, right? Um, yeah, and I also as like a working class living and partially raised person, it is really important for me to be like, I never want it to be like, oh, you have to have money to do disability art. And it's complicated because access costs money, right? ASL costs money, like the accessible space is more expensive a lot of time, etc. We're in that tension, but also I'm like, yeah, that was a fold out table and 5.99 curtains, right? It doesn't have to be $500 because that's not accessible either. Yeah. So I think I might have missed a question or two, but I think I answered some of them.
You did. You did. Thank you so much, Leah. It's been
So
such a
much.
pleasure to share time and space with you. Uh, Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I am going to turn it over to Angela for any last minute questions,
Can I say
concerns. Oh, Yeah, please.
There was an ask about what was Sharon Bridgeforth's book, and it's Notes on a
Oh,
Jazz Aesthetic. And it's her collected like essays and some of her theatrical and like other work. And there's like her collaborators have pieces. I think it's on like University of Texas Austin Press, so it's not going to be that cheap if you can't get it out of the library, but really great book if you can find it. And she has a robust website, Sharon Bridgeforth dot whatever, but it'll come up if you Google. She's amazing.
thanks so
Thank,
much, Leah.
thank you, Moya.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. And thank you, Toy, for being our Q&A moderator for today. Thank you all for showing up. We really appreciated all of your discussion questions. I'll, of course, add the questions to our running document. I just want to give a special shout out to Pro Bono ASL and Caption First for providing our ASL and car captioning for this lecture, as well as our upcoming lectures. A reminder that we do have another talk on July 7th. And if you need to register for that, you can register here. I'm going to put the link in the chat. There we go. And you can keep the conversation going on Discord. Feel free to add questions there. Thank you all again. Much thanks and with deep appreciation for sharing everything with us today, Leah. Have a great rest of the afternoon. Keep cool, folks. Take care. Bye.
Thank you all so much. Bye.